Graphic Design and Journalism: The Future of the Media, Printed versus Digital. Thank you so much for attending this presentation. I'd like you to know that my vision is based on personal experience, not just theory. For me, the users, their culture, and backgrounds come first. I'll try to be as clear as possible. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk about graphic design and journalism, and together we will try to come to some conclusions. I have divided this presentation in 4 items. I'll start with the evolution of newspapers through the last decades in order to understand where we come from and where we are heading to. After that, we will continue with data and statistics, reviewing current sales, circulation, and readership. And we will talk about the future of newspapers, both printed and digital. Then we will see what the role of a brand is. And last but not least, we will see a case study of a newspaper in Uruguay that illustrates the points mentioned in this presentation. Part 1. Newspaper Evolution. I invite you to travel quickly through the years to see where we came from. The 80s. In those years, you had to read the newspaper to be informed. It was also a sign of status. People actually read the news the newspaper produced. It was in the 80s when the design started to become important. But it was in the 90s and with the addition of color when the great transformation began. The first websites also appeared in that decade. In the 2000s, newspapers began to think about their readers, especially their habits and consumer patterns. Also, they began to think about their formats. Many went from broadsheet to tabloid and began to question whether they should be printed or digital. In the decade of 2010, the printed and digital newsroom got integrated. Until then, they were 2 different areas. The world became pro-digital. The iPad failed and the phones turned into the platform of the future. And today, nobody knows what to do. But let's have a brief look, decade by decade. The 80s. In those years, it was the journalist who designed the pages. And as I have said before, the designers were related to printing and not to the newsroom. In the 80s, the mobile phone was kind of a brick. And the newspapers in black and white were highly reliable and the best source to be informed. In the following short video, you will see a 1989 commercial of one of the most well-known newspapers in Argentina called Clarín.
La mejor y mayor información pasa por Clarín, el gran diario argentino.
As you can see, everything takes place in the printed newspaper, in the newsroom more precisely. We can say that the 90s is the decade of design. With the addition of color, the newspapers began to be redesigned, and the designer did become a relevant figure. The web pages made their first appearance, and the mobile phone was sort of a brick. In 1996, the StarTAC appeared, and it was quite an event. But we were still far from imagining that soon we would be reading the newspapers on a telephone. In 1996, the New York Times launched its first website. Please bear in mind that the printed and web editions were two separate newsrooms. Only the journalists who wrote for the printed version were important. The journalists who wrote for the digital versions were those who had been sent to the purgatory, those who just started, or the so-called nerds. In the 90s, also, most newspapers went from black and white to color, and design was reborn in the newsrooms. New concepts appeared like typography, styles, headline hierarchy, etc. Also, many went from broadsheet to Berliner or tabloid formats, mainly because people no longer had so much room to display the newspaper on the table, and on the financial side, the format change represented a significant saving in paper and ink. And newspapers incurred in the business of collectibles, which increased their sales. As we have said, in the 2000s, newspapers began to think about the reader's habits, consumer patterns, formats, most had color pages, and their web running, and began to question whether they should be printed or digital. Also, many newspapers changed from broadsheet to tabloids or Berliner. Those who wrote for the printed paper became accustomed to writing quick stories, more suitable for the web. The New York Times homepage look and feel was refreshed in April 2006. Providing a wider canvas to print stories in as screens continued to get larger. In 2007, the iPhone appeared, and history would never be the same. Newspapers became more and more sophisticated in design, offering diversified content for different types of audiences. The Guardian, one of the best designed newspapers in the world, went through a whole redesign that would mark a change of an era. It was not only a design change of their printed edition, but it was also the launch of a multi-platform concept. In the decade of 2010, the printed and digital newsroom are already integrated. Mobile phones are part of our lives. And the millennials, born in a world that revolved around printed and digital formats, are now 30 years old. And the centennials, 100% digital, can already vote and drive cars. The world is definitely cross-platform. Now we will see a commercial of The Guardian in which the concept of multi-platform is developed. If you compare this video with the one of 1989, in which everything went through the printed newspaper, remember? Everything here goes through the various platforms that the Guardian brand has. The printed newspaper, the PC, the mobile phone, and the
These are illegal
television.
immigrants, committed violent crimes.
And the video is about media
Little
conspiracy.
pigs are the victims.
Put down 2 houses. You got what you deserve.
But the pigs went too far. Kick your chinny chin chins up, fellas.
Boiling someone alive hardly constitutes reasonable
Somebody is
force.
going to break the law and intrude on
You
you.
can't protect yourself in your own home.
A man's home is his castle.
If someone tried to blow my house down, I'd do the same.
I knew the wolf. There's no way he could have blown down those houses. He had asthma.
But the wolf had asthma. So what's the truth about the pigs' houses being blown down? Inside job.
There's no reason why those two houses, one made from straw, the other from wood, should have collapsed. Not even a healthy wolf's huff and puff could bring them down.
The 3 little pigs have confessed to conspiring to commit insurance fraud, framing the wolf in an attempt to cover their tracks. Their motive was financial, as they struggled to keep up with their mortgage repayments.
I can empathise.
I'm behind on my payments too.
How could this have happened?
I've lost everything.
Thousands of illegal immigrants, millions of illegals.
Nobody has the key to the future of newspapers. We live in a pro-digital world, and everything that goes in that direction is well seen. Robert G. Pickard is a specialist on media economics and policy and the business challenges facing media in the digital age. Part 2. Data and Statistics. Digital versus print. What do you think? What is the future of the newspapers? The good news is that there is a future. But what would it be like? There may not be room for both. But let's try to come to a conclusion during this presentation. So far, we've seen a review about how the media industry has been changing since 1980. Now let's analyze together some data to see if we can cast some light on the subject. In this clearly pro-digital world, the printed newspapers have apparently been declining and the digital newspapers have grown in number. But I said apparently because it's not like that. The investments in the printed newspapers have been decreasing. However, the printed ones still make profits. The digital newspapers are not, in most cases, profitable, and they use the profits of the printed newspapers in their investments. Irish Chai is an expert in media processes to refocus papers' journals. She argues that the newspaper industry should refocus on paper and review the efforts it has been making to transform its processes, structures, and business models. We will now see some data of her investigation that can be revealing. In this graph of the New York Times, we can clearly see that the printed subscription is obviously higher. Since the launch of the first websites in the mid-90s, revenues on a global scale come from the printed newspapers. A newspaper editor once told me, printed newspapers are like old cows that still give milk. We are all expecting the moment the printed newspapers will be dead and buried. But why should we bite the hand that feeds us? The digital media presented themselves as the saviors of journalism, and in 20 years they have not achieved it. Anyway, it is clear that the industry has been declining. The digital revenues cannot exceed 20% of their total advertising revenue. The concept digital first, printed last, has both cut the resources of the newsroom and raised the prices of newspapers in order to turn all the resources to digital. In a research involving 51 average newspapers in the USA, in-market online readership has shown little or no growth since 2007. Yes, print readership has been declining, but there is one factor they never mention: price. The reading time of a printed edition of a newspaper has an average of 15 to 20 minutes against 2 of its digital edition. Here we can compare the reading time of an English reader over 18 years old, blue for print and green for digital. In this graph, you can see the relationship between the printed and the online versions according to the reader's age. In blue, print, yellow, digital. In Spain, if we add the online press and the printed one, it is the second advertising medium after television. Perhaps the first mistake was to transfer the content from one support to another at no cost. But let's pay attention to art director of Gulf News from the Arab Emirates, Miguel Angel Gomez, about the future of the media.
Hello, good day, and greetings from Mexico. I want to thank Ariel for asking me about what I think for the future of the media. First of all, I think the future is digital, and specifically mobile. More and more people is checking news through mobile platforms, and newspapers, in order to survive, need to rethink, because I don't believe newspapers are going to die. I believe newspapers need to rethink the way they tell stories and the kind of stories they publish. So going to newspapers, newspapers should focus on hyperlocal stories and focus on analysis, because news are not there anymore. I mean, Twitter and all the social platforms are gaining us the battle, or already gaining us the battle of breaking news. So newspapers, analysis, what to do, hyperlocal content, and then all the news goes to digital, especially, as I said, mobile. Mobile platforms are the most consulted ones, and everything breaks there. So I suggest all journalists and designers to learn how to tell stories using mobile, either long form, short form, social media, but learn how to communicate and engage audiences through mobile platforms. In regards of papers and mobile, the key is that content is king. You need to tell good long stories that keep the audience engaged for a long time, and you need to tell short stories and sharp stories that surprise and tell all the information in a snap. If you manage to do that, I think you're going to be successful in the battle of the media. Thank you.
Miguel has a different vision to Iris Chai, that through his studies on the American newspapers, she argues that the future is on paper. But it's important to note that Miguel puts focus on the stories. The print newspapers are losing their wealth and are becoming hybrids with yesterday's news. So, we must print newspapers thinking about reading them on paper. It's the only way not to let them die. So far, we have seen data and figures that minimize a bit digital successes. But let's leave the figures a little aside. For example, the following pages have been designed for paper. An infographic by Jaime Serra about the sensations felt when two people kiss each other. It would not be appreciated in the same way on the tiny phone screens. This is an infographic that I made about the Catholic religion in Latin America, also designed for paper. Is it the same having this large photo in your hand than looking at it on the small screen or your mobile phone? This is another work that I had to do about the restitution of children of Argentina's disappeared during its last dictatorship. A DNA bank was specially created so that those who were born between 1977 and 1983 and who are not so sure about their true identity can have a DNA test and compare the results with those of their supposedly actual families. The covers of Time magazine, these are works of art to be kept. Or these too. Here is another wonderful infographic by Jaime Serra about wages in relation to the market basket. I can say that Jaime Serra is one of the best infographics artists in the world. I know his work very well. Let's see what he has to tell us about the future of the media.
Vaya por adelantado que quien les habla no sigue la actualidad informativa desde que abandonó los medios hace ahora aproximadamente 1 año y medio. Lo cual supondrán algunos que, a pesar de mis casi 30 años de oficio en y para numerosos medios y desde distintos puestos de responsabilidad, me descalifica para hablar de ello. Hablaré pues como un lector, o escúchenme como un lector, como una persona más, como la mayoría, que no seguimos lo que dicen los medios, ni en los soportes digitales, ni en la radio, ni en la televisión, ni en lo que queda del papel. Y no lo seguimos seguramente por los motivos por los que en gran medida dejé de trabajar en ellos. ¿Dónde está la actividad periodística de antaño? Y entendamos por actividad periodística no solo informar de temas de interés para las personas con rigor, honestidad, con calidad, utilizando todas las herramientas de las que disponemos. Hablo de actividad periodística como espacio social que advierte, regula, arbitra, enriquece, en definitiva, nuestras vidas públicas. Actividad periodística que, si bien necesita el beneficio económico para desarrollarse, no hace del lucro su fin primero y último. Frente a las personas, la gente, haciendo los medios dejadez de funciones, ha tomado el poder. Hablo de la gente en mayúsculas, como entidad inexistente. Se supone que la gente somos todos, es decir, nadie. O peor aún, es nadie. Hemos sustituido el ser de las cosas por el índice de sus variaciones. La aceptación de ruedas de prensa sin derecho a pregunta, el viaje pagado por la fuente de información, la publicidad impúdica cuando se puede, los culos de Instagram en portada, han dado aliento cuando no han sumado directamente al fake, al tweet, al like, a la posverdad. El desconcierto, en definitiva, se ha instalado en la portada. Los medios han desvalorizado al periodista y sin periodista no hay medio. Frente a esto, el periodismo se me hace más necesario que nunca. Un periodismo de seres humanos para seres humanos. De periodista a lector, en singular. No como 1 o 1 millón de datos, no como una fotografía sustraída de una red social, como una ilustración de un banco de imágenes, no como un texto aséptico y anoréxico, un genérico, la gente, nadie. Sería necesario volver a narrar historias en primera persona, en singular. Historias que nos hagan sonreír, que nos hagan llorar, que nos hagan enojar, que nos hagan temer. En dos palabras, sentir y reflexionar cuando leemos un medio. Y digo cuando leemos, no cuando ojeamos. Recuperar a base de riesgo, pasión y de trabajo, de mucho trabajo, el espacio y el respeto social perdido. Y digo sería porque no será. Todas estas cosas pertenecen a un mundo que ya no existe y que no va a volver. Y créanme que como ciudadano lo lamento y me preocupa profundamente.
We must then think of paper for newspapers and think digital for news on phones. Maybe I can start talking about news phones. Digital and printed must be two different and complementary products. Just because we have to think about the user, and there is a huge difference between reading in a digital format and a printed one. We should not only think about transmitting information, but also creating user experiences for each format. A clear example of this is Internazionale magazine, where the best newspapers articles from around the world are published in its printed version only. Besides, every year they hold a festival in Ferrara, Italy, with different media and cultural events. We've been talking about different visions, and in that regard, the Italian magazine Lime, that deals with geopolitical issues, is very interesting. Not only does it break the traditional structure of the traditional magazines with long analytical content, but also it develops maps that clearly and graphically help understand and make decisions on complex subjects. The point of view of Laura Canali, the art director of Limes, is also very interesting. She is the mind behind wonderful maps in the magazine. She introduces the topic of art and emotion. Let's listen to her.
Disegno mappe geopolitiche dal 1993, quando è nata l'Imes, la rivista italiana di geopolitica. Circa 15 anni fa ho anche cominciato a disegnare la copertina della rivista e la copertina della rivista è un po' diversa da trattare rispetto alle mappe, perché le mappe normalmente io lavoro pensando e leggendo gli articoli degli autori, andando a cercare i luoghi che vengono citati all'interno di ogni articolo, mentre invece il disegno centrale della copertina di Limes la lascio come ultimo lavoro in fondo, perché per me rappresenta l'essenza del volume. Dopo aver letto, parlato con gli autori, letto gli articoli, analizzato le aree del mondo che devo descrivere, mi rimane come un'essenza, appunto, proprio un fluido, mi rimane un pensiero che racchiude un po' il succo di tutto il discorso, per cui negli ultimi 2 giorni elaboro un segno, un disegno, un'area geografica, dipende dall'ispirazione del momento, per realizzare un unico disegno che abbia un certo equilibrio di colori, una certa forma e che possa campeggiare all'interno di una pagina in modo equilibrato, un qualcosa che dia proprio il marchio di fabbrica del volume e il senso finale. Questo lo considero un disegno particolare, che è più una manifestazione artistica che pratica come una mappa geopolitica, perché a volte emoziona. Ho riscontrato, parlando con le persone che lo vedono, che mi scrivono, tanti lettori che trovano questo disegno molto particolare. Io credo che avvicinarsi a un oggetto artistico, quindi produrre un disegno che sia arte, passa attraverso le emozioni.
Laura's artistic vision reflects in her maps at art exhibitions. Then the journalistic products gain another dimension, a dimension that opens up alternatives without staying away from other resources and the digital arena. Now, in order to relax a little, let's watch this short video about the love of the newspaper above all.
I fell in love with you the first time I looked into them.
got a certain little cute way of flirting with them. Their eyes, they make me feel so happy. They make me feel so blue. But I know solid, falling in a great big way for you. My heart is jumping, you sure started something with them, their eyes.
Part 3. The importance of a brand. So far, we have talked about the evolution of newspapers. We have seen some real data from printed and digital newspapers, and we have established clear differences between printed and digital. Now, in this last part of the presentation, we will see the importance of the brand. The newspaper or news phone must cause emotion. It is a question of identity. The newspaper or news phone must cause emotion. It's a question of newspaper identity reader. The newspaper is a three-legged table, and all of them must be in perfect balance to keep the business up and running. When one of these legs is shorter, the table and everything on it may collapse. If we want people to trust our brand, we have to earn their trust. Newspapers are not just a collection of news. The bond with the reader is trust, and trust is the soul of a brand. Trust. Millions of people need accurate information that can change their day and their mood. The newspapers can tell you whether you should take an umbrella or a jacket or both through weather information, what type of food is healthy, nutritional information, who you should vote for, information and political analysis. That's why a reliable brand is so important. The power of a brand is a matter of trust. If it is not reliable, nobody will buy the newspaper or navigate its website either. Now, we'll see a video of a French newspaper in which the brand of the newspaper is the main character.
Ah, papa, c'est toi.
Part 4. Case Study. We have talked about brand value and the trust the readers place in the media, whether printed or digital. And before moving on to the final stage of this presentation, we will see a case study of redesign and its results. This is an example of a redesign I made for a newspaper in Uruguay, a small country next to Argentina. El Observador is the second most important newspaper in Uruguay. It was founded in October 22, 1991. It was born as a newspaper of finance and economy, and then it was transformed into a general information newspaper. El Observador is a relatively young newspaper and very well positioned. As most newspapers are 50, 100 years old, or even older, a design project is capital, because what is at stake is not just years of business. It's the history of a company and its relationship with its readers. The first part of the strategy was to optimize resources, so the Sunday and Saturday editions were made into a single weekend newspaper with more pages and supplements. In this picture, we can appreciate the varied editorial offer of El Observador. But it is also important to note that all publishing products have a graphic identity that makes them part of El Observador family. They could not be part of any other newspaper. I emphasize this because when many newspapers design an additional product, it has nothing to do with the newspaper's own identity, and the reader usually wonders, does it belong to my newspaper? Here we can see some of its brands. This is the redesign of the weekend newspaper. The Saturday and Sunday issue had a logo with a larger square with the letter O and its full name below. A clearer and more direct rebranding was made, El Observador Weekend. The big difference had to be in the general design of its front page and the subject matter of the offer, and not in a square logo just with an aesthetic function. We can see here another front page. It has a large content offer. There are at least 10 topics in this front page template. The upper part of the logo, the most typical contents of the magazine are located. And in the lower part, there is information about politics, economy, opinion, and in this case, there is a good photo of a sporting event. As a second step, the weekday newspaper was transformed into a journal with more depth and analysis, a great editing work. The printed newspaper analyzes and explains the main events of the day. The weekday newspaper became more compact. In the newsroom, we used to call it Express. A newspaper with a relevant thematic offer, and above all, a newspaper with deep analysis in most of its topics. A more difficult to edit newspaper because its content should be very well selected and developed. Here we can see another front page. As you can observe, there are only 4 topics on the front page, and a main one of great relevance. It is a challenge to make these front pages every day and to keep originality. In this case, the front page topic is the struggle for gender equality, and it made reference to a very important march that took place on March 8th. You can play with the word equality, and the letter G becomes a number 8. The concept for digital strategy is: breaking news is digital and for free, but some articles are only printed or digital premium, and these are not for free. They got 7,000 digital subscriptions, and this represents about $17,000 per month. Remember that against the 17,000 from the digital, they sell 120,000 hard copies per month. It represents a profit of about $200,000. So far, we have seen how the media evolved from 1980s to the present day. We have seen trends and data that may contradict the reality of the evident digital advance. I hope each of you will be able to have new bright ideas that encourage newspapers and its future. The relationship with the reader is what makes this profession so exciting. My personal view is that we must move away at least a bit from the mapping data in which an algorithm tells us what we have to do, and retrust a bit in the journalistic nose. We should trust our style and know what we want to transmit. Innovating, being independent, and taking risk is the only way to recover our readers' confidence. We all run after big data. Never again there will be new ideas, and we will all end up doing the same thing. Bottom line, the future is for printed journals, which must be clearly differentiated from the digital ones, whose future is obviously in print for newspapers and phone for Newsphone. To conclude, I insist we must think about the user. The experience of reading on paper is completely different from reading on a telephone. If we understand that they are two products with two different needs, and as Jaime Serra says, a journalism of human beings for human beings, from journalists to readers, there will be no doubt about the future of newspapers. Thank you very much.